As a realtor in Portland, Oregon, we get asked about crime quite a bit these days. Realtors, as you might know, are not able to speak directly to buyers about crime. We're supposed to direct you to online resources to sort of do the research yourself, because it could lead to steering. But I can speak to a broader audience, to you here on YouTube, about crime, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to give you some statistics, show you some of the areas, give you a little bit of the history, and kind of get you up to speed with where we're at as far as crime goes in Portland, Oregon, saving you the time to having to do the research yourself. All that starts now. All right, so we're going to start with the gun violence. There's a handful of different maps that you can access online. City Map shows the places in Portland where you're most likely to be injured by gunfire. This map was produced in July. It shows the places in the city where people are most often injured by gunfire using shooting data between January 1st of 2019 through April 30th of 2022. Only shootings where a person was injured or killed are included in this map. I'm going to open up a new web browser so we can see this map a little bit better. So these lines right here, this line right here separates Multnomah County from Clackamas County. And then over here, the other side of this line is Washington County. So you can see where everything is concentrated. A lot of this being, this is North Portland, where St. John's is. Over here is considered Northeast Portland, down here Southeast Portland. And then over here on the other side of the river, the Willamette River, which divides downtown Portland and the east side. You can see you have a big cluster over here downtown. So this map is going to be really helpful in giving you an idea of where this gun violence has come from in the last few years, because it's definitely ticked up in the last few years. We'll get into some of the statistics here in just a moment. The Oregonian, our local state newspaper, you can find their website at OregonLive.com. Has a little bit more of an updated map. Look how many Portland shootings happened near your home on this map. You can actually enter in your address if you want a little bit of a better idea as to where the density is for all of these shootings. Article starts off by quoting a local resident that lives in the Park Rose neighborhood. She said, "Life here is a nightmare too, frequently filled with sounds of gunfire, sometimes right outside our door. Police have recorded 10 shootings within a quarter mile of her home in just the first 9 months of the year." Park Rose is right here, and the airport is right here. So just east of the airport. Although when you're looking at this map, it doesn't necessarily look like there's a much higher concentration in the Park Rose neighborhood than a lot of these other neighborhoods, especially like St. John's and North Portland over here. Scrolling down here, if you want to see, there is a list, if you'd like to see a few more details on those specific shootings. Scrolling down, going back to 2019, so here's what we have. The red defines injury, the blue is non-injury. So back in 2019, 100 people injured from shootings. 2021, almost triple that at 272 people. Scrolling down, we have another map that shows non-injury, injury, and then fatality. There's been more than 2,000 shootings in Portland since 2019, with nearly half of those coming in 2021. East Portland and inner northeast have been hit the hardest. One thing I will say, looking at some of the history of crime statistics, these numbers aren't a whole lot different as far as location historically. A lot of the shootings have happened in this area in the past, just not at the scale that they've been happening recently. This next article from the Oregonian, Portland's 101 homicides in 2022 set a new record. I think before 2021 record was set in 2020. The record was back in the late 80s, and I think it was somewhere around high 70s or maybe low 80s, something like that, 78 homicides back then. So at some point we have to be tired of burying our children. I just want to scroll down and show you a few more stats. You can see Portland 2022 homicide victims. Portland 2022 homicide victims by race and ethnicity. Total homicides, 101 men, making up 83 of those, women being 18 of those. And if we get down here, Portland homicides 2022, you can see where all of those were, and you can click for more info on each one of those. So again, everything really condensed around here, from downtown Portland to East Portland to northeast Portland. And then scrolling down a little bit further, if you want to see Portland 2022 homicide victims by age, the article mentioned children, said we have to be tired of burying our children, which anybody should be if that were the case. Under age 20, there were 7 people, and this article specifically mentioned that one of those was 17. Everybody else was 18 and up. So Didn't want you to read this article and think that kids were getting killed left and right. Looks like there was one, technically, person under the age of 18 that was murdered in 2022. Here's a similar, we'll go to a similar graph from NeighborhoodScout.com. If you're searching things like schools and crime in neighborhoods, you may have come across this website. Usually comes up pretty high in Google. Aside from the higher crime rates, this is also going to list Portland's safest neighborhoods. And again, Portland is going to be, we're looking at Multnomah County here. Multnomah County being everything with the color right here. This over here is Washington County. And then Clackamas County goes way further south and then east. Clackamas County is actually really big. But what's considered the Portland metropolitan area kind of makes up this part of Clackamas County, just right down here. Lake Oswego, Oregon City, Happy Valley, Wilsonville, etc. So one thing is interesting about some of this data, looking at this here, you can see the crime over here in North Portland, Northeast Portland, East Portland. As a realtor, of course, it interests me to click on the real estate tab and see what the real estate looks like. And this says highest appreciating Portland neighborhoods since 2000. Now, this is interesting because a lot of this really kind of actually mirrors the crime. And 2000 is really about the year that a lot of gentrification started taking place, mostly in North Portland, Northeast Portland. St. John's became very popular in the last few decades. A lot of people moved into these areas. A lot of restaurants opened up in these areas. Portland is really known for its culinary scene. So these areas became actually very popular over the last few decades. It wasn't until about 2019, 2020, really around when the pandemic started, that the crime started ticking back up again in these areas. Although crime has been higher in these areas recently, you can see over the past few decades, these have been very popular places for people to move. Now let's look at Clackamas County, Clackamas being one of the 3 counties in the Tri-County area. Clackamas County records 5 homicides in 2022. Of those 5 homicides, they represent 4 incidents as homicidal violence, as 2 of the victims were killed in a single incident. And then just below we have other incidents since 2018. In 2021 there was 5, 2020 there was 2, 2019 11, and 2018 5 homicides. Again, Portland, Multnomah County was 101 last year. Couldn't find the homicide data for Washington County for last year. You may be familiar, again, if you look at these things online, if you look these things up, crimegrade.org does tend to come up pretty often on Google, at least for me when I search. Now, I caution against looking at some of these heat maps because they can be a little bit misleading. Some of these areas in red around Beaverton, Tigard, Tualatin, down here, which is also going to be Beaverton, out here towards Yamhill, not going to be anything near what you'll see here in Northeast, and in East Portland. So just glancing at these maps can be a little bit deceiving. The actual crime grade, according to this website, for Washington County is a B. Violent crime is an A. Now, if we scroll down and compare that to Multnomah County, where Portland is, they gave Multnomah County a D- in overall, a F in violent, and a D- in property crime. Clackamas County, they get an A- in overall, A+ in violent crime, and a B- in property crime. I mention these things too because when you're looking at grades and just heat maps like this, sometimes it can be a little bit deceiving. So it's always best to just look at numbers. As far as population goes, there's about 800,000 people in Multnomah County, which is the county here in red. Clackamas County has about half of that, coming in somewhere just north of 400,000. I think it's like 422,000 people. And Washington County is right in the middle, right around 600,000 people. So Multnomah County, with almost 60,000 reported offenses, almost 3 times as many reported offenses as Clackamas County, yet with only twice the population. And let's look at some historical data to compare and see how things have looked over the past few decades. And by the way, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new to this channel, living in Oregon, and you'd like to know more about what it's like to live in Oregon, make sure and hit the subscribe button. Also tap the bell. That way you'll be notified every time we drop a new video, which is twice a week. And if you're somebody that's thinking about taking the next steps and moving to Oregon, as licensed brokers in the state of Oregon, as much as we like making these videos, we'd love to help you move here. So you can call us, text us, email us, or click the link below in the description of this video on YouTube if you'd like to schedule a Zoom call with us. Best for people coming from outside of the state. All right, so some historical data here put together by An overview of police work in Portland presented by Sean Campbell. Now, this is a little bit old. It was made a few years ago, but we can go back and look back at crime towards the 80s. And you can see, how does crime compare to 30 years ago? It's dropped off significantly, pretty much a steady decline from the late 80s into the 90s, ticked back up a little bit in the mid-90s, and then dropped off pretty steep into the 2000s up until about 2018. Now, that's for violent crime. How about property crime? Very similar, much higher in the 80s, continued to drop off into the 90s from there. And this is the national trend too. Crime has been going down significantly since the 80s, not just in Portland, Oregon. All right, let's take a look at some more recent data. So this is data provided by the Portland Police Bureau, set back to go a year. We'll go back a little bit farther than a year so we can compare a little bit more. Let's take a look at November, December of 2021. Compare that to November, December 2022, January 2022, February 22. Compare those two. Looks like crime has dropped off a little bit. So December of 2021, 6,300 offenses, compared to December of 2022, a few months ago, 5,400. Most recently, comparing February of 2022, 5,500 offenses, February of 2023, 4,300 offenses. Now you can break these down into different types of offenses if you'd like as well too: assault, homicide, kidnapping, human trafficking, arson, et cetera, et cetera. But how do some of these numbers compare to other major U.S. cities? According to this article from Fox 12, Portland nowhere near the most dangerous cities in the U.S. New study of crime data finds. They've got a list here of the following are listed as the 15 most dangerous cities in the U.S. Number 1 is St. Louis, Missouri, followed by Mobile, Alabama, followed by Birmingham, Alabama, Baltimore, Memphis, Detroit, Cleveland, New Orleans, Shreveport, Baton Rouge, Little Rock, Oakland, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Kansas City, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, of course, as you might imagine, Portland didn't make the safest list either. Here's the top 15 safest. One thing that jumps out to me, New York City at 5. New York City is the most densely populated city in the United States, and you oftentimes hear people say that there's big crime in every city, and there is some truth to that. Typically, the more densely populated an area is, typically the higher the crime is per capita. So you would expect, if that held true for every city, and that was more of a rule or a law, you would expect that New York City would be one of the highest crime cities in the country, but it's not. It's one of the lowest crime cities in the country, and this is what is defined by large cities, 300,000 people or more. That's what they're using. So I found that a little bit interesting in reading this article. I think that tells us maybe that it's not just the population that determines crime. Part of it is the policy. So a video I saw last night from our local Coin 6 news channel. I'm going to let you listen to this here in just a moment. This just came out last night. Portland police recruitment numbers bounce back after record low. So a lot of people have pointed to the Portland police not having enough police to be able to do their job, and pointing to that being a reason for some of the crime. So let's hear what the Portland police are doing about that.
All right, they're hoping to meet their goal by the end of the year, but even when they do meet that goal, some in PPB say it's not going to be enough.
Not only were people leaving and we weren't retaining them, the reason why they weren't applying is because we weren't hiring.
In the past 3 years, Coin 6 has reported on all aspects of Portland's police officer shortage, including the cause and effects. The Bureau's lead recruiter, Sergeant Brad Yockett, says most of it goes back to the civil unrest in 2020.
The big social experiment of defunding and taking away money from the police, that occurred in Portland.
We've also reported on hiring challenges and how those challenges are largely due to the backlog at the State Training Academy. Right now, the wait to enroll in the academy is 6 months. I asked the deputy director of the state agency that runs the academy what they're doing to solve that problem.
What we've requested is going into next biennium a total of 20 basic police classes to start with, so that we can try to address the bubble or the backlog, I should call it, moving forward.
In 2020, the Portland City Council voted to reduce the police bureau to 882 officers. That number includes patrol officers all the way up to the chief. As of today, the Bureau still needs to hire 75 more officers to reach that number. Yockett says their goal is to meet it by the end of the year. However, I asked him if 882 is a sufficient number for a city the size of Portland.
No one in the Portland Police Bureau believes that 882 is the right number. We need to be a lot higher, but there's only so much personnel division can do, and we're tasked with getting to 882, so campaign 882, if you will, and that's what we're striving for.
Yeah, 882 seems like a really low number for a city the size of Portland. Do you have numbers or an estimate of cities that are sizable to Portland, what their forces look like in terms of numbers?
Almost all comparable cities, population-wise, have more police officers than Portland.
All right, and I've heard that as well, that Portland, compared to other similar-sized cities, has significantly fewer police officers. And I think where this has really come into play for people over the past few years, the biggest thing that we've heard is people making 911 calls and the Portland police not being able to respond to them if it's not a certain level of urgency. If it's somebody that's just trespassing on your property, they're probably not going to send somebody out. It's going to have to be something more along the lines of your life being in danger for them to make you a priority enough actually to send an officer out. So I think that's one of the complaints we've heard about people, not from Portlanders, not enough officers to be able to respond to calls. So hopefully this will help. Again, it sounds like the numbers are still going to be low regardless, but at least it feels like we're trending a little bit more in the right direction. On that same topic, real quick, let's take a look at where are the 10 safest cities in Oregon for 2023. Number 1, West Lynn, followed by Milwaukee, and then Lake Oswego. These are all three in Clackamas County. Canby is also in Clackamas County. Sherwood is in Washington County. And that rounds out the list for towns that are in the Portland metropolitan area. There's a little bit of a larger list here down at the bottom, top 20, and they'll give you a map of where all those places are if you want to see beyond that. So 11, 12 is Oregon City, also in Clackamas County, 15 in Forest Grove in Washington County, 18 Hillsborough, also in Washington County, and then Cornelius. So you have a fair amount of cities in Clackamas and Washington County, rounding out the safest cities in the state of Oregon. Just not going to find any of those neighborhoods in the Multnomah County where Portland is right now. And then final thing, I just thought this was kind of interesting. The effect of trees on crime in Portland, Oregon. The authors estimate the relationship between trees and 3 crime aggregates: all crime, violent crime, and property crime, and 2 individual crimes, burglary and vandalism, in Portland, Oregon. During the study period 2005-2007, 431 crimes were reported at 2,813 single-family homes in our sample. In general, the authors find that trees in the public right-of-way are associated with lower crime rates. Relationship between crime and trees on a house lot is mixed. Smaller view-obstructing trees are associated with increased crime, whereas larger trees are associated with reduced crime. Authors also speculate that the trees may reduce crime by signaling to potential criminals that the house is better cared for and therefore subject to more effective authority than a comparable house with fewer trees. So I found that in some of my research. I just thought that was interesting. The first thing that crossed my mind is correlation doesn't equal causation. So when it says in general, the authors find trees in the public right-of-way are associated with lower crime rates, well, it might just be that places that put trees in the public right-of-way are just more affluent places and places that tend to have lower crime in general. But nonetheless, that was still interesting. And I assume this just refers to Multnomah County, because when we talk about smaller trees and bigger trees, not a whole lot of small trees in Multnomah County, because that was the original development in Portland, Oregon. So you're going to find a lot of old, big trees in Multnomah County, whereas places like in Washington County, like Beaverton or Hillsborough or Happy Valley in Clackamas County, that have all these new subdivisions. You know what new subdivisions look like. They always cut all the trees down and they put all those saplings in there. So generally in Washington and Clackamas County, you're going to find a lot more smaller trees where crime is lower, and in Multnomah County, you're going to find a lot of bigger trees. So for that reason, I think they're just referencing Portland proper, Multnomah County. All right, well, I hope that gives you a little bit better view of what the crime's like, what it's been like, where it's headed, what to expect in the future, where it's at. If you have more questions about that, like I mentioned, as realtors, we really can't speak to you that specifically. That's the purpose for this video, but we can at least maybe direct you. So if you have some questions about some of these websites and where to access some of this information, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. If you're ready to take the next steps, if you have questions about moving to the state of Oregon, you can call us, text us, email us, or click the link below in the description. And make sure, if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, if this was helpful for you, make sure and subscribe to this channel so that way you'll get more videos, and give us a thumbs up too. Lets us know we're doing a good job. Feel free to comment below. We'll reply back. And until next time, take care, everyone.